You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, I'm Kelly Barner, and today is Friday, April 1st, 2022.
6.
Welcome to this week's Procurement 6. This week's Procurement 6 is proudly brought to you by the team at Art of Procurement, who remind you that you don't have to be confined by old school ways. Procurement professionalized in an era where optimizing supplier spend meant maintaining an obsessive focus on price while acting as an internal gatekeeper against non-compliant purchasing. While this may be important for some companies, we believe that procurement has the potential to make a much bigger impact. By skillfully aligning the power of the supply base with the needs of the stakeholders they serve, procurement can be a competitive differentiator. But it isn't easy, and it needs a modern approach, one that positions procurement as a strategic services business within a business, rather than a functional silo. To learn more, visit artofprocurement.com and access our many free resources.
5.
In this week's podcast, you'll get to hear a recent AOP Live session featuring Hedda Roika, Vice President of Product Management at Cievo, and Flavio Montiloni, an expert partner in procurement at Bain & Company, talking about how to utilize a data-driven mindset to supercharge your procurement organization. As the voice of the audience in these live events, I get to break into the conversation and ask follow-up questions of the speakers. In this particular event, I wanted to know what Hedda thought about the combination of corporate culture and data strategy. So I asked her, to what extent would you say that a procurement team needs to make sure that their approach to managing data actually aligns with the overall corporate culture? Here's what she told me.
Personally, maybe a little bit idealist about, so I'm of course on the side that data for everyone and let's share everything, but the truth is that not all organizations are ready for that. So it does take quite a lot of trust. It takes an atmosphere where you can discuss, where leadership doesn't feel threatened, that their decisions are questioned, but they should actually welcome it. So data is very, very cruel and very straightforward. That in that sense that it gives everybody, but also fair in the sense it gives everybody a fair chance to voice their argument based on a shared foundation. So leadership is less about finding the right decision yourself based on a report that nobody has access to, but rather sharing the data and then asking your peers and your colleagues, what should we do? And not all organizations are ready for that. So it does take a change in culture and leadership, and you need to create a space where people feel comfortable raising different voices of opinion and surfacing different data viewpoints, because that's when you really start getting into the valuable stuff, when people are showcasing their arguments backed up by data. But it does take a bit of trust and so on.
I think Hedda's point about data being cruel but fair is an important one. It may not feel great to roll up numbers or complete a complex analysis only to arrive at a bad news kind of number. But it is still better than trying to hit a subjective or emotionally charged target. Leadership takes courage, whether the task at hand is data analysis, change management, or supplier collaboration. Facing the math and then charting a path forward is the only way to succeed in today's highly changeable world. You can catch our full conversation with Flavio and Hedda on artofprocurement.com or subscribe wherever you choose to listen to podcasts.
4.
This week on the Art of Procurement blog, Philip Eidson shared his key takeaways from 2 of the sessions held at our recent Digital Outcomes virtual event. One of the sessions was about the procurement experience, and the other was about self-guided buying. Clearly, the impact of tech is critical in both, but so is procurement's perspective on where we should be spending our time and energy, or not spending our time and energy, as it may be. The first place we should not be spending time is training people to use our technology. If that is required, then the solution is a fail from the start. Why do we so often use Amazon as the gold star for the corporate buying experience? Well, did you ever have to take an Amazon training class? Are you certified to use the Amazon mobile app? No. And why? Because all of their access points are easy and intuitive, and they serve the customer. The second place we should not be spending time is on operational work. And since there is no sign of that work going away, we have to find a way to empower buyers to serve themselves, at least if we want to move on to more strategic, creative kinds of work. The transactions are never going to stop or even slow down. So rather than waiting for a quieter time that isn't going to come, procurement has to find a way to redirect those activities. Check out the blog if you'd like to read more from those sessions.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3.
I'm getting ready to present a free lunch and learn with Jeanette Neiden, a contract negotiation expert and a longtime friend to the Art of Procurement team on, well, what else? Inflation. I read my business news as dutifully as anyone, but it has been a long time since I was in business school, so I've been brushing up on my inflation fundamentals. For instance, you probably know that inflation is tracked using the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, a market basket of common consumer goods and services. But did you know that there is a core CPI measurement that excludes the two most volatile inputs? And do you know what those volatile inputs are? You can probably guess at one. Fuel, that's easy. But what about the other? Here's a trick. It's another F word. Food. Yes, food purchases are considered every bit as volatile as fuel. One of the things that procurement professionals need to be careful of is allowing consumer sentiment and content to cloud our professional judgment. Sure, some companies purchase fuel and they are probably feeling some of the same sticker shock that consumers are, depending on their management strategy and contracts. But it isn't quite the same. What procurement needs to be aware of is how inflation affects the buying power of their consumers, especially in non-essential or luxury categories. But this is also an opportunity to increase your company's market share, at least for companies that know how to seize it. Consumers are most likely to abandon their favorite brands when prices are high and supply chains are disrupted. Well, guess what? We're currently in a perfect storm. Whether that perfect storm becomes a win or a loss is really up to each company. Check out the links associated with today's episode and save yourself a spot in this open mic lunch and learn on April 14th.
2.
In other news, Hewlett-Packard recently announced an interesting acquisition. They are purchasing video conferencing gear maker Poly for $1.7 billion in cash and assumption of almost the same value in existing debt. This is the largest hardware-focused acquisition the company has made since they bought Compaq back in 2002. Now, this is less interesting from an M&A perspective and more interesting in terms of what it indicates about how HP sees the future of work. Despite all of the jokes about Zoom fatigue, they think working from home is going to continue to be a phenomenon. Enough of a phenomenon to drive purchases of home video conferencing equipment. Many companies are starting to speak out about wanting their employees to come back to work in the office. But with the demand for talent at an all-time high, the negotiating leverage is all in the hands of individual workers. It is much harder to replace a good employee than it is to let them continue working from home. I suggest we continue watching for signs that HP is looking to buy up a pajama pants manufacturer. Then we'll know where they stand for sure.
1.
On April 12th, we will be joined by longtime Art of Procurement friends Joe Payne and Jennifer Ulrich from CoreCentric for an AOP Live session titled The 3 Problems That Will Make Your P2P Implementation Fail. Joe and Jennifer have seen more procurement transformations than they'd probably like to admit, and all of the roadblocks stem from these 3 problems. The solution is a heavy dose of change management, always a challenge for procurement. They will answer live audience questions about why companies continue to struggle with their P2P implementations, the forms of ROI that C-level leaders beyond procurement expect to see from P2P, and how procurement can deliver them, and the specific investments in change management that can increase both the likelihood of P2P implementation success and also increased ROI. To make sure you don't miss out, register today and you will be prompted to submit your questions either in advance of the event or live on the day of. I'll be hosting this event with Helen McKenzie, who will join me as the voice of the audience. Just go to artofprocurement.com/calendar to find out more. And you can find all the links associated with the stories and events mentioned today at the show notes page for this episode at artofprocurement.com/podcast.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.